Hello, I'm Faye Mogensen from the island called Sadeas in ancient times and by some today. It's more commonly known as Pender on the west coast of British Columbia, Canada. I call this story Orca Dreams, and it spans many years. My part begins in 1990. I know that for certain because that's when I was pregnant with my first child. What joy, what excitement, and what terror. Would I be a good mom? Would I know how to look after this helpless being that I was bringing into the world? Oh, I began to worry. And then I did what I always do when I worry, which is to stop sleeping. Not a good plan. Fortunately, I did have friends I could talk to about this. One of them attended the same yoga class that I was in, and she said, "Well, why don't you come to the yoga retreat?" Yoga retreat? I was 7 months pregnant. Could I do it? I might as well give it a try, I thought. And so there I was, signing up, and before long I was packing up and then sailing across the ocean blue from Victoria, BC, which was my home then, to Pender Island. A long, windy road took me to the small farmhouse where the yoga retreat was taking place. Small is the operative room, because of course the rooms were small, including the bedroom where I was housed with 5 other students. Do you think I slept? Barely, because those classmates were rolling, tossing, turning, breathing, snoring, snorting. I spent the entire night awake. Come morning, I was not exactly refreshed, but I was full of enthusiasm to try the asana practice as best I could. And so I spent the morning with my classmates, stretching and bending and balancing. Over the noon hour, we were given our instruction for the afternoon, which delighted my ears. It was to go and find a quiet place somewhere on the property and lie in Shavasana, the pose of the corpse, for a full hour. Perfect, I thought. And so I brought my yoga mat and headed into the woods, found a place between a tall tree and a thick bush, lay down on my yoga mat and was getting very relaxed, maybe even about to drift off, when suddenly I became aware of one of my classmates who had not followed the silent instructions, because she was yelling, "Whales! Orcas!" I jumped straight off my mat and I ran straight down to the beach with all the other people attending the workshop. And there we stood on that pebble beach. Oh, ooh, ah! It's like a reflex. When you see a whale, you can't help yourself. You just exude enthusiasm. And it seemed that the more we oohed and we awed and we owed, the more the whales leapt and jumped and cavorted through the water. There was a whole pod of them. It was magical. Well, we oohed and we awed and we owed for quite some time until suddenly my legs turned to jelly. And so I backed up on the beach and found myself a great big log, piece of driftwood that I could lean up against to continue watching and marveling at those whales. I was quieter now, and And I suddenly became aware of my daughter inside me. She was leaping and jumping and cavorting, just like the whales. I felt such connection between myself, my daughter, and those whales. And then I began to laugh at myself, because though I didn't know a lot about whales, I did know that they travel in pods, led by a matriarch with some of her daughters and their calves, and maybe even the calves' calves, a big family group. And I was suddenly reminded how normal, how natural having a kid is. It happens all around the world, not only for people, but animals. And somehow that thought and that experience helped me through the rest of pregnancy. I slept a whole lot better. Of course, when my daughter was little, I told her this story many a time. But then it kind of slipped into the background. I'd become more interested in whales, and so I read anytime there was information about the orcas that live in the waters around here. Lots of worrisome news, numbers declining, no one really understanding why. And then there'd be a news release that one of the whales was pregnant. Ah, wonderful. In 2018, there was news like that. It was a whale known by scientists as J35, or by poets and dreamers as Taliqua. She was pregnant. But the good news suddenly turned bad. An hour after she gave birth, less than an hour after she gave birth, her calf died. She swam down, dove down, picked up her calf, lifted her calf onto her nostrum, her forehead, and she carried the calf for 17 days. Oh, she showed the whole world that we humans and whales have much in common. We love our children. She was helped by her pod. Sometimes it was just too much, and so one of the other pod members would take a turn carrying the calf. But it was mostly Taliqua, 17 days, and then she let go. I wondered, might Taliqua have been one of the whales in that pod who had blessed me so beautifully when I was pregnant? I looked up more information. No, she was born in 1998. But perhaps her mom, who is affectionately known as Princess Angeline, perhaps she'd been there. She's part of J-Pod. But then there are other whales that are part of J-Pod. Perhaps the matriarch in my group was Sela, or Granny. She is one special whale. She was one special whale. Thought to be born in 1911. She lived until 2016. She became a wonderful crone whale. And I can only imagine the stories that she had to tell. Stories of the time in her early years when the waters were quiet and clear, when the boats that floated above were mostly canoes or rowboats or sailboats and just the occasional motorized ferry boat. What a difference between then and her late years, when the waters were and still are full of speedboats and fishing boats and tugboats and ferry boats and container ships whirring and thrumming and distorting the sound waves. So it would have been hard for Sela to even tell her story to her children. Would have been hard sometimes to find clear waters with the leaks of oil from all those boats and the effluent emerging from the harbors of Seattle and Vancouver, Bellingham, Victoria, and points in between. Scientists and whale watchers watched carefully as Granny aged. They were curious. How long would this whale live? The last time she was seen, in 2016, she'd caught a salmon and she was pushing it towards her grandson. Of course, because like us, whales love not only their children, but also their grandchildren. I became a grandmother just over a year ago. And with Sela's story in my mind, I have to ask myself, what am I doing? What can I do for my grandson? I feel very lucky because my daughters and their partners, my husband and our grandson, have chosen to live together on a property that's large enough for us to grow food. We've got a big vegetable garden, we've got chickens, and we're planting trees. Now, I might not live to taste a walnut from the trees we planted last summer, or maybe I'll be lucky, but it does take 30 years. But it warms my heart to know that Cosmo, my little grandson, he'll probably taste them. The other thing that brings me great hope is the fact that already, though he's only 1.25 years old, Cosmo has already seen 2 pods of whales. Ah, yes, we whales and humans, we humans and whales have much in common. We love our children and our grandchildren. Thank you for listening.